fourth Sunday in Advent, and I know you've all gotten used to me sharing from my sort of like, I didn't know I had a collection, but my collection of quilting stuff, some of it old, much of it nicely artistic or sort of heirloom quality. Well, you're going to love today. Because, here it is. This is what I have to share with you today. This is, in fact, the least artistic, the least heirloom, and probably the most sort of like meagerly executed quilt. This is the quilt square that I made in 6th grade crafts class.
Aww.
I was probably 12 maybe, and you can see, like, even though it had been a few years earlier that we had all that bicentennial stuff going on, those scraps were still hanging around in my mother's drawer because red, white, and blue theme, right? Anyway, I didn't know this at the time. I picked this pattern because I loved how it worked. If you think about it, it's kind of like an Escher drawing. Every way you turn it, it sort of changes. Like it's 9 squares if you look at it one way. But there's this one square that sticks out in the middle. But if you turn it, there's a square. And then you turn it again, and here's all these squares. And this is the part that drives me crazy. This square is the same size as these squares. Wow. But it doesn't look like it, right? Because of the way the triangles break it up. And if you stack them next to each other and make a quilt out of it, it gets even more fun. I love looking at stuff like this. Apparently, this particular quilt pattern is most commonly known as the Ohio Star. And apparently its origins, I had fun diving into a nice little rabbit hole on Wikipedia about this. But its origins, they think, are probably from the early 1800s, likely in the United States, though you never know because pretty much everyone that was hanging out in that time who had European ancestry probably brought things with them either through themselves or their immediate, person who came right before them who came from Europe. So, but we try to claim it as an American pattern. And the official designation of an Ohio star is that it only has these 2 sets of colors in it. So you can reuse this in lots of different ways and switch up how you group the colors and it looks like a different pattern. But this is the official Ohio star way of doing it. And it's it's got some cool stories associated with it. The best one, there are lots of them, but the one that really stood out for me was its association with Mary Patterson Leary. Now, anyone ever heard of Mary Patterson Leary? She was an African-American woman. She lived in Oberlin, which is in Ohio, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I figured there would be people here who would know that. She lived in Oberlin, Ohio, and she wasn't a slave, she was free, but she was in that time, she and her husband were abolitionists. They ran parts of the Underground Railroad, and she was the first African American to attend Oberlin College. Wow. So, kind of cool, right? Interestingly, for her story, it wasn't an easy time for her. I mean, if you can imagine what it was like to be a black woman in the Midwest before the Civil War and all of that, and running the Underground Railroad. She lost her husband, who went off to go with John Brown to Harper's Ferry raid. So then she was widowed, quite young, and had to raise their children on her own. And when her daughter grew up, she married someone named Langston, and she became the grandmother. They had a baby boy who also lost his father, and the mother, this is getting confusing, the daughter of Mary had to go out to the cities to support the kids, so Mary ended up raising the kid, and this kid was none other than Langston Hughes. See, you knew I was going to get there. Family is complicated. So what's interesting about that is that Langston Hughes, if you've ever read his writing, talks about how he learned everything that sort of fed his perspective, that became part of all this rich poetry and writing that he did in the Harlem Renaissance. He heard it at his grandmother's knees. So here, you can just imagine Mary sitting there with a young Langston, telling him about the Underground Railroad and the time of slavery and all of the hardships that they went through and the things that she and her grandfather would fight for because they wanted a better world for their grandchildren. And here's Langston, and then he's going to seed another movement to imagine a better world for African American people in the United States in the 20th century and be part of the Harlem Renaissance. So nice little circle there of how all of that sort of audacious, hope-filled dreaming works in our world. And it's if you think about it, it's an act of love, that sharing those stories and seeding another generation that's willing to take those risks, to go from the dream of how the world should be and try to make it into more of a reality. So stars are, in fact, really popular themes in quilts, and they often go with this theme of moments of stepping into something new and transitions and that are seeded with love and hope, like weddings, births. There's so many different patterns that are used. In fact, I don't know if anyone's ever seen, there's some really incredible ones that come out of the North American Plains Indians that are like, I don't know, they have like 100 pieces to them. And they go on their ceremonial robes that they wear for weddings. They're, just so stunning. So this theme, stars, lighting the way forward, hope, all that kind of cool stuff. And apparently also 8-pointed stars. We read this week in our Wednesday service are about fulfillment in the sense of like Christ will come on what is seen as the 8th day, the day out of time, that will be our final fulfillment with God. And then that person also threw in a little like because they're a priest and they're nerdy, this way they see things. Lots of triangles means the Trinity. So cool pattern. I had no idea when I was in 6th grade that it was so full of meaning, but it was fun. And we love making it. And very simple. Very, very simple. So our 4th week of Advent, the theme is love. It's that 4th blue candle. But I feel like it actually circles us back to the 1st week, which was about hope. Because that 1st week was a theoretical sort of like that all the apocalypse. Is my microphone giving us trouble again? It needs the. There we go. Hopefully that'll fix the problem. But this original theoretical hope, all that apocalyptic reading, like we can see something's wrong here, we'd like this to be better, but this is the practical week. This is the hope enacted in these sort of risky ventures of love that like, things are not right now, but I want it to be better for my grandchildren and I'm gonna do something about that. Now, I'm curious if any of you ever found that sometimes it's hard to hope. Sometimes it's hard to do that because, what if you get invested in it and you're disappointed, right? It's hard to really act in that risky, love-filled way because you could be very, very disappointed. The world disappoints us all the time. So to love in this way and to act in that kind of deep-seated dream of hope for a better world for our children and our grandchildren, it requires vulnerability, incredible vulnerability. And our world needs people who are willing to do that more than ever. So the Sanctified Art people said this in many ways is a spiritual practice. It's not just a crazy out there thing, but to say the world can be better, and I believe that with God, we can act on this. They call it a radical act of love and hope. And the world's better for it. And the church, we're the place for that. So today we have some incredible dreamers here, dreaming and acting out their love in the world. We get this great, beautiful meeting between Mary and Elizabeth. And it's funny because our Advent readings, you feel like we should have been working up to this. We should have gotten all the pieces. It's like you've hit a TV show on like episode 6. And the only hope you have of figuring out what happened before is if you watch the first 2 minutes where they like kind of give you the little run through. But ahead of today's gospel reading, Elizabeth has found out that she's going to have a baby. She's probably past that. And I like to imagine Elizabeth as the cool elder aunt. She never had children of her own, but she loves to help out all the teenagers who are maybe, getting in trouble with their parents. She creates this lovely safe space coming over to Aunt Elizabeth, and she'll take care of you until your parents sort of cool down because you were smoking behind the gym or whatever it was that you got caught doing. Only now she's pregnant, and she's got a baby. She's well along. And then we also miss the Annunciation, which is why we sang about it before we read that gospel. But that's in there too. So Mary has also found out that she's going to have a baby. And I imagine she doesn't really react in the Annunciation. She's just like, whatever, God. And then the next thing we know, she's running off to Elizabeth's. It doesn't tell us what happened. Maybe she got her parents' permission before she went to see her aunt, but I like to think of it as she ran away from home for a bit. Because that's, again, time-honored tradition, happens all the time. And especially in big, extended families, you know who the safe sanctuary relatives are that you can go to. And if you're a parent, you know if your kids disappeared, where they're likely to turn up, right? That world of extended, loving family. And Elizabeth is not disappointed. She doesn't say, Mary, how did you get pregnant? What are you doing? And like wag her finger at her. She just says, I'm so glad you're here. She gives her a hug. She says, come here, honey. And she wraps her up and she fills her with this loving, gracious, beautiful, risky welcome. And that gives Mary the freedom to then sing that great song, the Magnificat, which is her expression of all of her love and hope for this baby she has in her that she's been told is of God. So there's another kind of audacious act of love and hope that we don't hear at all this week, but is still sitting there below the surface and super important, and that's Joseph.
Yes!
You like him?
Well, yeah, he could have ordered Mary stoned, divorced her quietly, and just taken off and left that whole mess.
Yeah, they weren't
married yet.
They weren't married yet, but in that time, the agreement that they had, this betrothal, it was a contract. And if something was breached in that contract, he would have been entitled to compensation. He could have moved on, but he doesn't do that. He thinks about it. It's not easy for him. We hear that in Matthew's gospel. We don't hear it in Luke's gospel, but they dovetail pretty well. And in the end, he decides to say, it's okay, Mary. I love you, and we'll figure this out together. Bishop Michael Curry, who was our presiding bishop until very recently, he says the language of dream is the language of hope. The language of dream is the language of hope. The dream for the world to be a better place than it is, and then the love and the risk to act on that. So I have another hopeful dreamer that I want to share with you about today. Her name is Polly Murray. Has anyone heard of her? So she's a super interesting figure. So we've had, we started with the Underground Railroad, and then Langston Hughes, and the Harlem Renaissance, and then Polly Murray is like probably the next generation after that, mid-20th century figure. She was, among other things, the first Black woman to earn a PhD from Yale Law. Interestingly, she was also raised by her aunts and her maternal grandparents, African-American woman, like I said, one of the first women to become an Episcopal priest. A lot of her jurisprudence writing underpinned the arguments that like Thurgood Marshall and others were able to use to argue all of the civil rights legislation that came through the court system in the 60s. So pretty important person in Dreamer. Also had grandparents who had been slaves. Tough time, but inside of all of that, she was also a gender non-conforming person in a time when she didn't really have a lot of options to either be accepted for the gender that she saw herself as and experienced and was, nor any way to make any sort of transition through that. So you can imagine how hard it could have been for her to express hope through all of that. But she did it. She did all of that. She, on top of all of these other things, was quite the poet. So I want to share, I'm going to switch mics. Let me turn this guy off because it's driving me nuts. And I'll see if I can fix it before communion. I'm going to go back to this guy. How's that?
Better.
Okay. Whew. Okay, so this is Polly Murray. She's also in our Book of Saints. And it's her verse called Dark Testament, verse 8. And it goes like this. Hope is a crushed stalk between clenched fingers. Hope is a bird's wing broken by a stone. Hope is a word in a tuneless ditty, a word whispered with the wind. A dream of 40 acres and a mule and a cabin of one's own and a moment to rest. A name and a place for one's children and children's 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 children at last. Hope is a song in a weary throat. Give me a song of hope and a world where I can sing it. Give me a song of faith and a people to believe in it. Give me a song of kindliness and a country where I can live it. Give me a song of hope and love and a brown girl's heart to hear it. And doesn't that just remind you of Mary's song? Similar sort of audacious, risky, vulnerable articulation of a dream for a world that can be more than it is. And a person who was able to act on that. So today I have a quilt square for us. Fine, I've got too much stuff under here. Ta-da! This is not the quilt square that they sent for this week, but I switched it out because it needed to be our Ohio Star. But I thought today we could risk thinking about what our dreams are for the world right now. What risky dreams do we have? What ways do we think the world could be so much better than it is? And that it's almost too scary to say it because, I think of Mary. How many times in her life do you think she was disappointed in all those hopes that she had for what things could be for her son? It wasn't easy, but she kept hoping and kept saying it. And I think it played out in the end. So anyone willing to share what your hopes and dreams are for the world right now that are hard to say?
Consensus.
Consensus. I like that.
Yeah, willing agreement.
Willing.
Willingness to listen.
Willingness to listen. Trish.
The end of tribalism.
Okay. End of tribalism. Nikki.
It's following on from Trish, but recognizing the humanity in each other, seeing yourself in somebody else.
Yeah, recognizing our shared humanity. Should I say it like something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Online congregation. Oh, I see one. Annie, is that your hand up? Go ahead.
Yeah. So, the recognition of permanent world peace.
Can you say that again? World peace, is that what you said? Okay.
Permanent.
Permanent. Oh, okay, that's a good one. I like that. It is risky and audacious and hopeful. Permanent world peace. Marcus?
Humility in our leaders.
Humility in our leaders. Okay. All right. Donna.
To me, with hope goes faith.
Faith.
They connect. If you don't have faith, your hope may never find an ending or a solution.
All right. Nancy.
I've been reading a book about Afghanistan, so I'd like to say freedom for women in Afghanistan and recognition of their humanity.
Freedom for women in Afghanistan. Okay. I hope I spelled Afghanistan correctly. Anyone else in the online congregation that we're missing? All right. Emerson.
Acceptance with forward motion.
Acceptance with forward motion. So I want to make sure I understand, do you mean like being willing to live through change?
Well, I originally just thought of the word acceptance.
Okay.
But I don't want acceptance just to be complacent.
Oh, so you're saying acceptance that isn't resignation,
Yeah.
but is part of transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Jane.
Jane, go ahead.
My hope would be that everyone has the audacity to choose love over hate,
Okay.
no matter the circumstances.
Everyone chooses love over hate. All right. Are we willing to go on to the harder question? Because there's a harder question.
Sure.
All right, we heard our dreams. They're risky to put them out there. How might you be being called to embody hope in this time and this place? That might be some of the ways that you could be acting out that loving, risky, difficult hope. And it could be in the thing that you articulated, or it could be something else. But anyone have any ways that? Oops.
For myself, it's learning about, well, right now it's sexism, but learning about how people are getting hurt, both systems, by systems and by each other, or even within movements. Because my EFM class is making me learn feminist intersectional perspectives on the Old Testament.
Ooh.
So I'm learning all the different flavors of feminists and how even within that movement that's supposed to be elevating women and making them be less marginalized, how they were jerks to each other within it.
Got it. Okay.
And
So learning about how we impact each other in ways that we may not even realize
yeah,
through systems and the relationships within them.
yeah.
Okay.
Like because Emerson was talking about acceptance isn't enough. You need to be moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. Vicki.
I'm copying Jane because I think actively choosing love over hate personally in our own lives, that's a way that we can.
I think that's very true. That's not just a dream.
No.
Yeah, you get it. Once you dream it, then you gotta kind of like put your feet down and walk it. Yeah, thank you very much, Vicki, for that. Okay, Sue, and then, oh, okay, Donna, go ahead.
What
And
comes to mind too is choosing love over power or wanting to be right.
okay, so choosing love over hate or needing to
Love over power, love over
be right.
feeling important because you have
That's
lots
powerful.
of money.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Sue?
My personal calling has been through the soup kitchen of St. Francis
Uh-huh.
and feeding people and having empathy, because there are certain days that there are people there that it's hard to accept them as they are for various reasons,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So you're saying when you feed people, it gives you an opportunity to have to accept people for who they are, and
And being kind to them,
yeah,
even though there are odors that come from them, their hands
Yes.
are in such shape and all, but it needs to be helped with a smile and a few kind
Yeah.
words, I think.
and that's grace enacted in the same way that Elizabeth embraced Mary, right? That's grace enacted. Go ahead, Donna.
Well, I think that the world is full of a lot more love than we're giving credit for.
Uh-huh. So
I think-
highlight the love that's there.
Well, I think there's so many ways of love and so many different ways that we don't always recognize it because people react in a different way. And we're not used to that way. So to us, we're judgmental
Yeah.
because why are they acting like that? Or why
Mhm.
is this going on? But it is love in their way or their,
Love looks different.
yes.
And yeah, for
And
different
we need to
people.
recognize it as
Yeah.
being true to them
Yeah.
and go and try to accept it,
Yeah.
basically.
Thank you. Okay. Online congregation, we don't want to miss you out. Does anyone in there have any to share?
Annie's got more.
Go ahead, Annie.
I'm hearing a theme on this, and I think overall it's acceptance over judgment.
Acceptance
Over judgment.
over judgment. That's a good one. That does sum up a lot of this. Okay. Any other online congregation people? All right. Anyone else here in the room have some of the ways that they're going to enact? Trish?
Sometimes love can be tough,
Yes.
and it's hard to figure out how those two notions can be reconciled.
Yes. You sound like someone who has adult children. Man, those 5-year-olds, they were easy. Yeah, okay, thank you for that. Any others, or are we ready for a blessing? All right, thank you everyone, this is beautiful. It will go up, this finishes our quilt.
Nice.
It's good, and it'll be on the wall for Christmas, so thank you everyone, good work. I invite you to bow your heads. Lies of cynicism are loud, and so are the voices of others. But, beloved, hope is worth fighting for. May the Spirit of God surround you this season so that you might trust like Joseph and sing like Mary. The same hope they held is still alive today, transforming creation into God's will for justice and peace. As you prepare your heart for Christ's arrival, may you make room for God's presence, and may your actions reflect God's hope for humanity. and God's love for all creation.